The 4th Legion, the Iron Warriors. Primarch, Perturabo. Allegiance, Traitor. Chaos Affiliation, Undivided. Homeworld, Olympia, formerly. Currently, Medrengard. Current Commander, Perturabo. Specialization, Siege Warfare. Battle Cry, Iron Within, Iron Without. From the moment of its founding, it was clear that the 4th Legion would be an inexplicable fighting force. The gene seed of their Primarch showed above-average stability, allowing for the rapid growth and easy deployment of the 4th Legion into difficult battles. Further, the 4th Legion would distinguish itself most impressively during the conquering of the Sol system. With the Emperor commanding them directly, the 4th would go on to win many notable campaigns in his name and were rewarded with first access to many new weapons and armaments from the Mechanicus of Mars. These boons, as well as their stubborn and uncompromising methods of war, would mark the 4th Legion as exemplary warriors. At first. While it was true that the 4th Legion was an exceptionally large and dependable force, armed with effective and state-of-the-art weapons and arms, the problem would arise as the campaigns dragged on and more campaigns were waged afterwards. The ever-stubborn 4th Legion either refused or were unable to adapt and alter their standard battle doctrine, fighting in familiar, predictable, and at times outdated ways which other legions took notice of. Their greatest trait was their fierce tenacity and stubbornness, which was recognized by Horus Lupercal, who would go on to make use of the 4th Legion as tools for long, drawn-out battles of attrition. These acts were not only costly, but thankless. The 4th Legion would throw themselves at near immovable obstacles and hold the line stubbornly, while their cousin legions would work to break the back of the resistance. In this way, the 4th Legion became like a great cudgel to bludgeon against the enemy, not an elegant and cunning blade or a focused and precise spear tip, but a mere battering ram to beat against enemy forces again and again. They were sometimes referred to as the Workhorse Legion for their unwavering stubbornness and their willingness to obey any order to the letter. Perhaps the 4th Legion did not notice this treatment of their legion, or perhaps they didn't care. But it would all boil over in the Encaledon campaign. During the siege of the planet Enkaledion, the 4th Legion used their standard war tactics against a prepared and very durable enemy. Though they were victorious in the end, their losses were staggering, with nearly 30,000 Marines killed in the campaign and their entire expeditionary fleet destroyed. The 4th Legion was utterly shamed. And they would pay the price for it when they finally met their gene father, Perturabo. When the Primarchs were scattered, the Primarch of the 4th Legion, Perturabo, would appear on the world of Olympia, a world of various warring city-states. For a whole year he would wander the wilds of the planet until he was discovered near the city of Lycos, where he was taken to the tyrant of Lycos, Damikos. Realizing the boy's incredible potential, Damikos adopted Perturabo and tried to treat him like a true son. He gave him an education, allowed him positions of authority in various matters of state, and over time, Perturabo proved his intellect, talent, and insight as he revealed his efficiency in not just politics, but architecture, war, tactics, and engineering. He would fight various wars for his adoptive father against rival city-states, gaining a deep understanding of siege warfare and using his engineering mind to construct and build near impossible weapons and engines of war that would tip the scale for his home city-state. Despite the boons offered to him, Perturabo never truly trusted or cared for Olympia or its people. The Olympians were religious and spiritual people, which Perturabo found distasteful as he was a man of reason, logic, and science. He never offered familial love to Damikos and cared nothing for his adoptive brothers. The only family member he cared for was his adoptive sister, Caliphany. Further, Perturabo seemed fully aware he was not a naturally born creature, and he also somehow knew he was not from this world. So when the Emperor appeared to him, Perturabo did not doubt who he was and immediately swore loyalty to his father. The Emperor would give Perturabo control of Olympia and introduced him to his sons. The result of these two boons would have harsh consequences. First, giving Perturabo control of Olympia meant deposing Demikos, who would spend the rest of his life mounting rebellions to take back control, which would come back to cause severe repercussions later. Second, when Perturabo met his sons, he spent time overviewing their history, battle doctrine, traditions, and overall strength. After carefully looking over it, he came to a grim conclusion. They were not up to his standard. Therefore, his punishment? Decimation. Every 10 Marines would draw lots and the loser would be beaten to death by the other 9. This action would reveal the nature of Perturabo as a commander, cold, ruthless, and uncompromising. To put his newly acquired legion to the test, he launched an immediate campaign on a nearby moon of heretics. The engagement was a resounding success, and it would take the Imperium completely by surprise. The 4th Legion had been reborn under their father, and the crusade would never be the same. The 4th Legion, now known as the Iron Warriors, had truly come into their own and proved themselves as masters of siege warfare. This was no personal boast either, but rather a fact that the entire Imperium had come to recognize. The Iron Warriors were experts at breaking open enemy defenses, ripping down fortress walls, and creating siege engines the likes of which had never been seen. For this reason, the Iron Warriors were often called upon to engage in the most vicious and long siege battles. Unfortunately, this would lead to a negative impact on the Legion's psychology. Siege warfare is naturally brutal, grueling, and exhausting. Because of this, the Iron Warriors developed bitter and frustrated outlooks, not only on the Crusade and their allies, but even their own engagements. While they were no less effective, they began to resent the very sieges and trench wars they were forced to engage in. In fact, some Iron Warriors would become ecstatic if an enemy chose not to surrender, as it meant that once the breach was made in the defense, they could rush in and massacre the defenders with alacrity. This brutal and bloody lust that had developed within the Iron Warriors began to bother and concern the other legions, as it was starting to overshadow the once logical and calculating nature of the Iron Warriors that they once stood for. Furthermore, the Iron Warriors were experts at building and maintaining fortresses. As a result of this, it was often the practice that the warriors would establish fortresses and battlements on newly conquered worlds, then leave elements of their legion behind to manage those fortresses and the world itself while it was brought into compliance. This practice meant the legion was almost always under strength for their engagements, and it meant that the Iron Warriors were almost always spread thin throughout their campaigns. Perturabo resented this privately, but did not argue. Instead, he quietly fumed about the injustice of it. How could the Emperor demand victory from him, when always restricting and forcibly forced to divide his forces? And yet, the resentment and anger of the Iron Warriors did not stop at just this. The Imperium and the other legions had begun to stereotype the Iron Warriors as little more than crude and direct machines of war, nothing more than siege engineers and frontline garrison troops. As a result, they felt slighted, overlooked, and outcast from the other legions. In particular, the Iron Warriors held animosity with the Imperial Fist Legion under Rogel Dorn, who many people claimed were the natural superiors to the Iron Warriors. Dorn would boast of the incredible defensive capabilities of his defenses around Terra, and Perturabo would not overlook these apparent challenges and insults to his legion's abilities. But this wasn't the only conflict to be established thanks to the Iron Warriors. The Raven Guard and Corvus Corax were hateful towards the Warriors, seeing them as cold, unfeeling, and more machine-like than human. Now, this is not to say the Iron Warriors did themselves any favors. They were rude and coarse to their cousin legions, and the Imperial armies feared associating with the Iron Warriors. Indeed, the Imperium military began referring to the Iron Warriors as corpse grinders, as the Iron Warriors were infamous for using human shields as well as racking up incredibly large casualties of mortal soldiers during their campaigns. As a matter of fact, it was common for Imperial forces to mutiny or revolt rather than be assigned to the 4th Legion. Horus would fix this problem by assuring only criminals and convicts would be forced to work alongside the Iron Warriors, and this proves that at least some of the concerns and disdain for the Iron Warriors were not unwarranted. In many respects, Perturabo was doing himself and his legion no favors. By his sister's own admission, he had developed a martyr complex, constantly going out of his way to take the more difficult or costly path with no complaint in the hopes it would earn the praise and attention of others. In a sense, much of the costly battles and wars of attrition the Iron Warriors were forced to undergo may well have been avoided had Perturabo not hungered for attention and approval. However, as the years went on, he and his legion continued to be isolated, resented, and distanced from the rest, leading to an even more angered, bittered, and hateful legion. At last, this would all culminate in a turning point event for Perturabo, which would spell the end of his loyalty, when his own subjects of Olympia revolted. Perturabo was informed that Olympia had revolted against the Imperium. With the death of his adoptive father, the various city-states had fallen to infighting once more and declared themselves independent from the imperial rule that they had been subject to. Furious, Perturabo returned to Olympia to fix the problem in the brutally efficient manner he was used to. He ordered all the people of the planet to engage in decimation like he had done with his own legion, his preferred method of expunging weakness. Every 1 in 10 people must die or be killed and then enslaved. Olympia refused, and the Iron Warriors were ordered to attack their own homeworld. Several Iron Warriors refused and were killed. In the end, the world burned. Over 5 million civilians were slaughtered, and the rest of the populace was enslaved. As for Perturabo, he confronted his still living but elderly sister, who accused him of being the architect of his own demise. As stated before, she referred to him as a petulant child with a martyr complex. Unable to handle these insults, Perturabo strangled her with his own hand. In the aftermath of the siege of Olympia, the entire legion, Perturabo included, were left shaken by their own actions. They knew, and Perturabo lamented, that they could never be forgiven for this. Some elements of the 4th Legion even broke away and left the Legion entirely, unwilling to take part in any more Perturabo's barbarism. Perturabo would find comfort in the voice of Horus Lupercal, who informed him that he commended his actions on Olympia and that he would certainly forgive him if he stood by his side. Therefore, Perturabo would swear an oath to aid Horus, and thus the downfall of the Iron Warriors was complete. The Imperium, unaware of the Iron Warriors' secret alliances, ordered them to Isvan V alongside the Raven Guard and the Iron Hands legions. There they would declare their true loyalties and attack their allies, killing thousands of their cousin Astartes. They would ride the coattails of this early atrocity and ambush the Imperial fists at fall. From there, the Iron Warriors would join Fulgrim and the Emperor's children as they made their way to Idris, under the belief that the Crone World held a secret weapon called the Angel Exterminatus. In truth, it was actually a ruse to allow Fulgrim to achieve demonhood. With the Salamanders, Raven Guard, and Iron Hands legions hot on their tail, the Iron Warriors were forced to retreat directly through the Eye of Terra's heart, coming out on the other side of the rift in the Talon system. Upon arriving there, he learned of another secret hidden beneath the planet known as the Black Oculus. Intent on acquiring it, he launched a campaign against the Desert World. However, this time he met stiff Imperial resistance. The Iron Warriors suffered catastrophic losses in the protracted campaign, and Perturabo was forced to retreat from the planet again without his desired weapon. He would have to engage in mass recruitment campaigns to make up for his losses to his legion, but it would have to be swift, for Horus had new orders for the Iron Warriors. The Ruin Storm, the great warp storm that Lorgar had created to slow down the Ultramarines, Dark Angels, and Blood Angels legions, had finally died. The Dark Angels were laying siege to traitor homeworlds to cut off supply lines, and the Ultramarines were now en route to Terra. Horus had dispatched the Night Lords to try and slow down the Dark Angels, so it would be the Iron Warriors' job to stop the Ultramarines. The Iron Warriors were to set up defenses on various supply worlds that they needed now that the traitor homeworlds were lost to them. If the Ultramarines managed to take back these worlds, then the heresy would meet an early end. So the Iron Warriors quickly established their defensive positions and held the line, but it was bloody. Undersupplied, low on manpower, and engrossed in bitter engagement against a massive legion, many of the Iron Warriors noticed that this felt all too familiar to the Great Crusade, where their legion had been made to engage in constant, thankless, and costly battles, rushed from world to world with no time to rest, and demanded to do the impossible at the behest of some tyrants who played God with their lives. It left a bitter taste in the mouth of Perturabo and his legion, but he did what he was told without question. However, Perturabo would be called away from this engagement as he was given new orders to find and unite with Angron and the World Eater's Legion on Ulanor to prepare for the siege of Terra. Perturabo obeyed, abandoning scores of his sons on the worlds they were tasked to defend, which they would continue to do for years to come as they bled at the hands of the Ultramarines and the Imperial forces. From Ulanor, Perturabo began preparations for his greatest challenge yet. Perturabo and his legion were the masters of siegecraft, the undisputed artisans of war who broke down barricades and walls without mercy. But now they were to hurl themselves at Terra itself, with defenses erected and managed by his rival brother Rogel Dorn and his Imperial fists. It would be his greatest challenge, and perhaps greatest triumph, to rip down the walls of Dorn and prove his own superiority. Thus, the Iron Warriors, along with the other traitor legions, laid siege to Holy Terra. Of all the traitors, the Iron Warriors were the face of the siege of Terra, even more so than Horus and his own sons. First, the traitors unleashed an orbital bombardment upon the Imperial Palace, defended by void shields. This was also Perturabo could analyze the shields and the Aegis for weaknesses, locating a few for the traitors to begin their assault. However, the Iron Warriors were not themselves deployed until landing zones were acquired. As the battle raged on, the traitors suffered serious setbacks. The Imperial Palace was protected by more than just walls, but the Emperor's own psychic barriers which prevented demons or the demon Primarchs themselves from entering. Eventually, Horus turned to Perturabo for a solution. Perturabo revealed that the Lion's Gate spaceport was the key target they should reach. It was a crucial choke point, and one that, if taken, would allow the traitors to land their titans, as well as grant them access to the inner and outer palaces. The Iron Warriors would lead this assault, and Perturabo hoped that a blunt assault would shock his brother Dorn enough to help push through the defenses. The battle was long, arduous, and costly for both sides. Dorn's tactics were impeccable, and combined with the psychic strength of the Emperor, Perturabo was forced to change strategies just slightly. The Iron Warriors launched a feint as if to take the bridge of the spaceport, but in truth, this drew attention away from his real plan to land his own ship in the spaceport and begin deploying his full reinforcements. The ploy worked, and thanks to his efforts, the traitors were able to take the first wall of the palace and begin deploying demons on Terra. However, the traitors weren't having everything their way. The Iron Warriors, in conjunction with other traitor elements, had been leading an assault on the Gorgon Bar, another crucial defensive checkpoint. However, the location was held by the Primarch Sanguinius, as well as Imperial Fist Captain Fafnir Ran. There, the Iron Warriors broke against the forces raised against them, and the Gorgon Bar was held intact. Perturabo sought to exploit another weakness of the palace at the Saturnite Gate. This too would fail, as Dorn knew of this weakness and had turned it into a trap for the traitors. At this point, Perturabo began to lose faith in this war. Unlike the majority of his traitor brethren, Perturabo had refused to submit to chaos despite being opposed to the Emperor. However, now many of the traitor legions were chaos-worshipping mutants. This was no longer a battle of legions versus legions, but rather a warp abomination scourge versus humanity, and it irritated him. However, the ultimate insult to Perturabo would come when Horus ordered him to break up his already worn-out and beleaguered legion and have them take up minor roles in other battles going on across the planet. His position as leader of the siege would be taken by Mortarion and the Death Guard. Furious at the insult, and outraged at the stupidity and weakness of the traitors, Perturabo and his Iron Warriors left Terra to resume the defenses of their Empire of Iron. Some Iron Warriors would remain out of zealous and stubborn refusal to flee, but the majority of the Legion would follow their Primarch, leaving the traitors to whatever fate lay in store. Ironically, the Iron Warriors abandoning the siege would spark the beginning of the end for the traitors, as Perturabo had been perhaps the ultimate mastermind in countering Dorne's defenses. Without him, much of the traitor force's cohesion began to break. Though the siege would go on for some time to come, the successes would begin to dwindle. Indeed, it wouldn't be long until Jagatai Khan and the White Scars successfully retook the Lion's Gate spaceport, which the Iron Warriors had worked so hard to take and hold. As the Iron Warriors withdrew to the Eye of Terror, the fate of Olympia was a tragic one. The Iron Warriors stationed on the planet were forced to hold out against elements of the Imperial Fists and the Ultramarines. In the end, seeing no victory in sight, the Iron Warriors detonated the nuclear stockpile of their own homeworld, ruining the world itself, leaving it as a barren wasteland. In this, the ultimate treachery of the Iron Warriors was achieved, as they had not only massacred their homeworld, but now left it as inhospitable. His success against the Imperium and Dorne himself after the heresy. On the world of Sebastius IV, Perturabo and the Iron Warriors set a trap for Dorne known as the Internal Fortress. Dorne, still stricken with grief over the Emperor's fate at the hands of Horus, and the catastrophic losses suffered during the heresy, as well as his frustration with Guilliman's proposed Codex Astartes changes that he wished to make to the legions, fell for the bait of the fortress and declared that he would, quote, dig his brother out of his hole and drag him back to Terra in an iron cage, leading to the nickname for this battle being Battle of the Iron Cage. Dorne arrived expecting an honorable battle, but Perturabo had no intention of giving it to him. From the moment of their deployment, the Iron Warriors began isolating the Imperial Fist companies and detachments and destroying them one by one. When the Fists finally did break into the Eternal Fortress, they discovered it was just another trap, a decoy to draw the attention of Dorne and his sons and lead them into further slaughter. After almost a week of fighting, the Imperial Fists were laid so low, they were forced into fighting individually rather than as a unit that they preferred, and their fate looked grim. Thankfully for the Fists, Guilliman and the Ultramarines arrived to reinforce and save Dorne and his legion. Perturabo, though, despite always standing against mutation and chaos, finally ascended to demonhood, becoming a demon primarch like most of his traitor brothers. He then took his legion and fled to the Eye of Terror. There, Perturabo would claim the world of Medrengard as the new home base of the Iron Warriors. Despite inhabiting a chaos world, the Iron Warriors do not have any love for warp sorcery or warp entities. They swear no loyalty to any chaos gods, but rather to Perturabo himself. However, uniformity of the Legion did not last long. In the 34th millennium, a civil war broke out among the Iron Warriors, fracturing them into various warbands. Perturabo either could not prevent this, or at that point didn't care. And after the 13th Black Crusade, the Iron Warriors have begun expanding and spreading across Imperium Nihilus, constructing fortress worlds and territories as a show of force and grandeur. Wherever they go, the Iron Warriors march with a devastating and horrifying presence that brings both fear and revulsion. Traitors they may be, but they are not depraved or mad like their cousins. There is an efficiency to the Iron Warriors, a cold and empty fury like forged metal. Indeed, as they themselves attest, iron within, iron without. After the Civil War fractured their Legion, the battle makeup and uniformity of the Legion has changed drastically. The Iron Warriors are divided into various bands called Grand Companies, commanded by a Warsmith. Warsmiths are high-ranking and powerful Iron Warrior commanders. The Iron Warriors still maintain their old way of war, as precise and intense in war. They specialize in siegecraft and hold themselves to the same ludicrously high standards their Primarch did during the Great Crusade. New Iron Warriors are chosen for Grand Companies and subject to difficult and demanding ordeals until a Warsmith feels they're worthy. And under Warsmiths, one will often find captains who maintain a hierarchy under their leader to control units or squads of their Astarte brothers. Interestingly enough, the Iron Warriors detest Chaos Mutation and Submission. If an Astartes notices Chaos Mutation in the Iron Warriors, they will cut off the mutated flesh and replace it with cybernetic replacement. However, this doesn't mean the Iron Warriors won't make use of the warp. Certain warsmiths and engineers have learned how to merge demons with machines, turning them into demon engines. Giant living machine constructs with the souls of demons powering them, making them massive, powerful, and nigh unstoppable. These engineers who are capable of this are known as demon smiths. The Iron Warriors like to think themselves able to control chaos rather than be subject to it, but this often backfires on the warriors, quite often in ironic ways. For example, obliterators are the result of a unique chaos affliction where an Astartes becomes nothing more than a living machine, with weapons morphing from his flesh and his skin nothing but metal and furnace fire. The very first of the obliterators noted in Imperial records were former Iron Warriors. Even now, though most Iron Warriors attempt to avoid such fates, some Iron Warriors have been noted as having the ability to morph weapons from their bodies, a chaos-infused trait that could be a precursory symptom before becoming an obliterator. In the end, despite their belief in having mastered chaos, perhaps they are simply fooling themselves. Even before the return of Perturabo, the Iron Warriors were renowned for their staunch tenacity and brilliant tactical awareness. Their ability to analyze a defensive structure and strike at weaknesses make them adept warriors to use in long, drawn-out siege. Further, their ability to craft and maintain siege engines and war machines is second to none in the Legion. Their tenacity, stubbornness, and willingness to incur even high battle casualties make them an invaluable legion when engaging in long, drawn-out campaigns. Further, the Iron Warriors field devastating weapons, many of which are demon-infused or similar. As a result, the Iron Warriors can have a vast arsenal of destructive tools to break open barricades, eradicate enemy forces, or create openings for assault. However, despite the Iron Warriors claiming they do not serve chaos, they are arrogant enough to think they can harness it. A mistake made by many other Chaos warbands before them. They willingly use demons to power their machines and weapons, which create risks of mutation, corruption, or possession. The Iron Warriors may well be the ultimate example of playing with fire at risk of being burned. But worse than this, the Iron Warriors are petty to the extreme. Like sweaty teens on a video game, they take even the most minor of competitions or games deadly seriously. Backstabbing and sabotage is not uncommon as a form of payback for slights or losses. Just like their days during the Great Crusade, weakness or failure is met with strict and even lethal punishment. There have been cases of Iron Warriors firing on their own ships that go too slowly in front of them, impeding their progress. A tack-turn tactic that they learned from their own Primarch. Indeed, the Iron Warriors will always be remembered for their pettiness as well as their stubbornness. I am well aware that the Iron Warriors are a favorite of the traitor legions, and many see them as justified in their betrayal. While I've never agreed with that. Granted, I know far more about Perturabo than I did about the Legion overall, but upon further study and reflection, I find them perhaps the most effective of any of the traitors, but not the most justified or relatable. While not insane or maddened like other traitor legions, that doesn't make them less irritating to me. They're quite petty and overly aggressive in everything, taking even broader games and strategy simulations seriously, to the point an Iron Warrior might backstab his own battle brother out of petty vengeance for a loss in what is essentially a board game. I also think it's incredibly funny that they claim to have mastery over chaos and don't prescribe to it, when not only is Perturabo now a demon prince himself, but they also seem to not realize that them using demon power to use in their machines only puts them at higher risk of corruption. Now, this isn't to say they aren't interesting or even badass in appearance and demeanor. The 4th Legion genuinely does shine among the traitors as not only being one of the coolest, but also one of the most effective and efficient. I'll also say that Perturabo has genuinely chilled out since he turned into a demon prince. But I think this is because, as his sister said of him, he was a petulant child with a martyr complex. Perturabo constantly was seeking approval and praise from others. He suffered so others would notice him suffer. He put his soldiers through hell and engaged in long and exhausting campaigns so that his deeds would be recognized. Whether it was for the Emperor or for Horus, he was always looking for someone to say, "Wow, you and your legion are so cool. You suffer so much and go through so much hell all for us. You're so amazing, Perturabo. You and your legion are the best." But he never got that, which made him very petty and angry. But now that he's not fighting for anyone's approval, he's mellowed out. He may have finally learned none of what he did was worth it. He didn't have to fight to please anyone, but he learned that a little too late. I'm not sure if his legion has quite got the message yet, because they still show a lot of pettiness in a lot of their behavior. But that's just my take on them. If there is anything I can definitely end on, it's this. I don't like many of the traitor legions. In fact, I find all of them annoying for one reason or another. But if I had to pick one that really did seem like they were an appropriate enemy for the Imperium to deal with, the Iron Warriors genuinely do feel like one of the most staunch, difficult, and infuriating enemies for the Imperium to fight among the traitor legions. After all, it can be very difficult breaking a wall of pure iron.